It's great. It's absolutely great. I do I do want to ask you just on some gender stuff briefly. Obviously, the left's love affair with any body, any group, any nation, any movement that hates America is now well established. This unholy alliance that
been going on, since 1917.
Right. Set aside the hypocrisy, I guess, and just look at the fact, the feminists mollycoddling and pandering to radical Islam, an ideology that would destroy every great advance for women if it were given the chance.
Hang all gays.
Yeah, I mean, to say nothing of the gays they love so much, unless of course we vote Republican or have the wrong opinions about something, in which case.
Or there are gays demonstrating in Israel for gay pride.
Right, right. I mean, it's too much for them to handle. But the idea of rape culture that sprung up on college campuses is another outgrowth of this cultural Marxism, of Marxism applied to social issues, applied to gender, skin color, all the rest of it. Now, people like Christine Hoff Sommers, and I talked about this on my last college tour, have demonstrated the absurdity of this with numbers. It's like if 1 in 4 women were truly being raped on college campuses, it would be like the Congo.
Rape has been defined down, so it's nothing.
So now it's kind of like looking at you for a bit too long or something.
You're hot looking. I just raped you.
Yeah. So now it's sexual assault or whatever. I guess this ties into a question earlier. I mean, it's not just young people. Now adults are believing, or at least professing to believe, stuff that they must know isn't true.
Oh, because people are afraid. It's not true, but if you say that, the price is way too high. Especially in the atmosphere we have now. I mean, this guilt by accusation. There was a time in this country during the McCarthy 50s when the left was upset about guilt by accusation, guilt by association.
Right.
Now it's what they.
But do you think it's going to get better? Because Hollywood now is reaping what it has sown.
The thing that you can count on the left for is never to know when to stop. So they're going to go on and on until they run into a wall.
Los Angeles is just a crater, a smoldering crater. It's But I mean, with what's happening in Hollywood at the moment, and it's billowing out, and yeah, fine, we've got the Roy Moore thing, but let's be honest, by and large, almost wholly, this is virtue signaling liberals who lo and behold, like nobody could have guessed this, end up having these ugly, dirty, secret lives, or end up being guilty of precisely the things that they are finger wagging to the rest of us about. This has got to have a consequence with the public. This has got to have a consequence with ordinary Americans. Because ordinary Americans are watching this and saying, everything I thought that I knew about Hollywood, that they were out of touch, elitist hypocrites.
Degenerate.
Right.
Excuse me for the term, but it sounds so old-fashioned.
Right.
But what this guy did is degenerate.
But this word is
and the support of him is also degenerate.
What do you think about how sexless the liberal sex scandals are? Because I can't help but think, like, if it was a real sex scandal, there would have been like lots of forcible, real horrible stuff that people don't like talking about. But all of these, Wiener's just sexting. Weinstein's like off into a plant pot. There's not much sex in these liberal sex scandals, is there?
Well, we'll see about Weinstein. I'm not sure.
But you know what I mean, though, right? It's just there's a lot of this
it used to be
adolescent diddling.
It's interesting because I remember when it was England that was the capital of
sleaze and sex. Yeah.
Sex scandals.
The MPs with hookers and all the rest of it in the 90s.
And in America, the scandals were all about money.
Right.
Washington scandal.
Well, at least when it was conservative politicians, they were actually having sex and they were actually doing drugs. It was like coke and hooker orgies in, at the Corinthia or whatever. They were actually doing this stuff.
I don't care if it's among consenting adults. But, what's the consent level? I'm thinking I cannot. I used to like Lise Wheel, who was on the O'Reilly factory, he had the legal team. Mm-hmm. And she's a lawyer. And she claims to have been sexually harassed by O'Reilly for 15 years. Mm-hmm. When does it become a deal?
Yeah.
No.
Well, I don't think there are any virtuous players.
They wait 10 years, they rise.
After having been paid, they're rich and they're famous.
They trade sex for careers and, and monetary rewards. How's that different from hooking?
People don't people don't like it when I say this, but Rose McGowan appears to me to be enjoying this a little bit too much. And if you look at the crowing...
It's revenge. This is just, this is all revenge.
You take money to stay
I
quiet.
took it. I kept my mouth shut while Harvey Weinstein did his number on all these other young women.
Yeah.
I got my stardom. I know it's her. I'm thinking of Ashley Judd. And then suddenly, I'm a feminist hero. Come on.
Yeah. And it's a calculus. So just to show how cold and sociopathic this is, it's almost like they've worked out the precise moment when it is more professionally advantageous to speak out than to stay quiet, and struck then, and then this sort of like,
Well, all it takes is one story. I mean, it was the New York Times story that did it. Yeah. Okay, the New York Times did it. Now I can unload.
Right, and because now it's safe for me to do so.
Okay.
And Rose, the worst bit of this whole story for me, the most damning detail in all of it to come out wasn't about any of the men. It was the fact that Rose McGowan was considering a 7-figure settlement to stay quiet again.
Of course,
But
it's deals.
it's
And when you give it a pass, you encourage it.
but it's so messed up. I'm just sitting there watching these people peacocking.
People are messed up. I mean, you can't. This is just a human condition. What drives us up the wall is their self-righteousness.
I grew up on a farm in England. This stuff is crazy to me. Like, how can she's talking about taking 4 or 5 million for it to stay quiet again, and she's still a feminist hero. And I'm just a regular person sitting at home with my jaw on the floor and my eyes like rolling into the back of my head, and I don't get how.
It's the old joke of we're just haggling over the price.
Right. It's incredible to me. You named to move on to a more recent era. You run now Front Page Magazine, which is your one of your front lines of attack.
It is my main website. Yeah.
Right, and you named Steve Bannon the Person of the Year. Other places went with the obvious choice with Trump and all the rest of it. It was the only publication I saw that did that. Certainly the first one. Why did you do that?
Well, look, I'm a big fan of Trump because he's a fighter. He fights back. If we had 100 Trumps, we could really change this country. But when Bannon came into that campaign, Trump was like 16 points behind. And Bannon turned the campaign around. And now, I don't remember if he was doing this when we named him, but going outside and organizing the People's Army, as it were, that is a hugely important mission he's on. And I think that the creation that Breitbart is just a major achievement. It is. You go to Breitbart, you see exactly where the war is, you see how to fight it. It's just a great, and it's so huge. It's really made a tremendous impact. And also the people who picked, Trump as Man of the Year. That time it had Hitler as Man of the Year, and Stalin as whatever. It's just they're big news.
Well, you picked it. You actually tried to pick the Man of the Year.
I've never cured myself of the way I was brought up, my leftism. I'm always looking to be in the vanguard.
Yeah.
And Bannon
but this is
the
what
vanguard.
Breitbart and Bannon have in common with you, and in your, I think it might be the book before last, where you quote Mike Tyson, and you're saying,
yeah.
and you're saying, you want to start every conversation with the leftists by punching them in the mouth, and it's that kind of.
Everybody has a game plan until you punch them in the mouth.
Yeah.
And the left they're always punching conservatives in the mouth with racist, white supremacist, and so forth. So, I just want to see conservatives use those words against the left.
Well, what I think it showed, to bring us back to where we started, is that your journey from the front lines of the left to the front lines of the right has given you a sort of unique, instinctive understanding of how to win that the vast majority of conservatives simply don't have. They don't possess it.
It's called go for the jugular.
Right. And I think it's what people admire about you so much.
The Democratic Party is a racist party. I'm waiting for the Republican who will say that. Yeah. They control every major inner city in America 100% and have for 50 to 100 years. Every killing field, Chicago, Detroit, Ferguson, St. Louis, Baltimore, all of them, 100% controlled by the Democratic Party. Every failing school system, every injustice, every oppression that poor blacks and Hispanics experience in this country, Democrats are 100% responsible for, and Republicans are too tongue-tied ever to mention it.
Yeah. It's
not
nice.
to mention identity politics, which is racism.
Yes. I feel like the conservative movement's caught up to you after maybe a couple of decades, and now I think you're enjoying a renaissance in the Trump era when conservatives are showing up, actually willing to fight, and that's why so many of them are looking to you. I
felt
think
like a voice crying into the wilderness until.
But you're not now.
Until there was this Tea Party was formed. Obama did a lot of this, but the Tea Party was formed, and suddenly there were 100,000 conservatives marching on Washington. Until that moment, you wouldn't find 3 conservatives marching down a street. They'd look at each other and say, "What are we, collectivists?"
Yeah, this is awkward, But it's a constitutional
thing,
isn't it?
Things have changed, and then there's this whole younger generation, yourself included, of conservatives who are really aggressive fighters, and they're cleverer about it than I am. I'm kind of like a sledgehammer. But I love these people who put up this poster in Harvard Square saying it's okay to be white.
It's so great.
Incited. The left immediately reacts, and they show their true colors. They're racist.
But this is wonderful. This started on 4chan, this thing, and then I leapt on this too. But it's a perfect example of saying something completely uncontroversial. Like, you don't need to hate yourself for what you were born
Part
as.
of their thing, we're supposed to be inclusive, right? It just explodes that lie.
And it wasn't white pride. It wasn't white nationalism. It was, it's okay. It's the most milquetoast, lukewarm, imaginable endorsement. It's okay to be white. And it's in this lovely, elegant, thin font. Just like it is the most unthreatening, the most non-confrontational,
Unless you're a leftist,
imaginable statement, phrased and presented in the most uncontroversial and non-confrontational way possible, and they lost their minds.
Yes, of course.
It was beautiful. It was very beautiful.
They understand. They understand.
Because they knew what we were getting at.
You are racist.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with me.
Milo.
And you have taken an interest in me since I appeared.
Since I first saw you.
Since I appeared in this insane country. It's wonderful. It's the best country, but it is crazy. And I'm grateful to you for everything. But it's also been lovely for me to watch somebody who I'm very fond of and have great affection for suddenly getting the dues you deserve, because now everybody, I think, is realizing, everybody, as I say, is catching up to you. So anyway, thank you so much.
For the country.
No, absolutely. And congratulations on another great success this weekend.
Thank
you so much.
Hey, Milo.